Hey everyone, back again for another isolation exercises session. What I want to go through with you guys today is another sort of pad-based exercise. It's actually more of a series of exercises actually. It's kind of a sort of singular concept that I've then kind of stretched out to do other things with. So basically this exercise centers around the concept of triplets with alternating accents basically. Everyone should be hopefully familiar with what a triplet is. So, you know, a basic triplet would be something like what we're going to do with that to kind of make this exercise what it needs to be is we're going to accent the first note of every triplet basically. So what's going to happen there is we're going to have an accent on our leading hand and then followed by an accent on our weaker hand. So it sounds something like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's a pretty simple idea there. Where this exercise gets a little bit more interesting is what I like to do then is to take the accents and sort of shift them along to various different points in the triplet. Obviously we can have them on the first note of the triplet like we just did, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We can move them to the second note of the triplet and we can also move them to the third note of the triplet. So what we're going to do for the first time round is we're going to start off with accenting the first note of the triplet. So what we're going to do 4 triplets and we're going to break into doing the accent on the second note of the triplet, and then we're going to do that 4 times round, and then we're going to go back into accenting the first note again. We're going to kind of loop it around. So that sounds something a little bit like this. Okay, a little bit quicker. Do now is we're going to do the same thing, but rather than going from accenting the first note into the second note of the triplet, we're going to go from the first note and accenting the third note of the triplet. So that will sound something a little bit like this. Okay, a little bit quicker again. Pretty simple idea. When it starts to get, the tempo starts to get much higher, it starts to become a little bit weird, particularly if you're doing it to a click, because we're so used to hearing, you know, the start of the triplet on the 1. Your brain is kind of almost kind of fighting your hands, and if you do it for too long, you can kind of almost start thinking that the accent, if you've moved the accent, that it's actually on a different note, and it becomes a little bit confusing. So kind of training your brain to kind of recognize the difference, the shift in those accents is a really, really good exercise. You know, obviously we can do each of those particular versions for slightly longer. So we could do it 8 times around the accent on the first note of the triplet, followed by 8 times around this accent on the second note of the triplet, and then repeat that again. Or with the accent on the third note. So that's kind of the first part of this exercise really. So getting your brain around doing that is a really, really cool thing. There's kind of two other versions of this, I suppose, that I quite like to do. They're both a little bit more tricky, but they are definitely worth your time. The first version is to physically change how you are accenting those particular parts of the triplet. So obviously at the minute we're just accenting the first note or the second note or the third note simply with an accent, a single stroke on one of our hands. What you can obviously do to make things a little bit more interesting and give your sort of your hands and your brain a little bit of a workout is you can change those accents to something else. So for example, you could change them to a flam, or you can change them to something like a herter. So with flams it would sound something like this. Let's just focus on accenting the first note with flams at the minute. So you've got, so you've got like a flam accent rudiment. Then you could say you could switch from accenting the first note again to accenting the third note, but played with flam, so that would sound something like this. That one's quite tricky because what you end up with at the very end when you loop back round again is you've got basically alternating flams. So the end goes, and you've got two flams followed by each other, both played different ways round. Like that. That's a really, really good one. Obviously, you could then also do it with accenting the second note as well if you want to. I mentioned doing it with herters as well. Herters are they're not really a rudiment, but they're one of my favourite little stickings. For anybody that doesn't know, a herter is essentially a triplet. It's basically a triplet but played with four notes. So it's four notes squashed into the space of a triplet, and it's phrased like a triplet, but you're actually playing four notes. So rather than playing a triplet like 1, 2, 3, you're actually playing it as 1, 2, 3. So you can then apply that to the exercise that we were just doing. So you can accent the first notes, which is actually what I was just doing. You can accent the first note in a triplet with a herter. The quick notes come right at the start of the phrase. You could then move it again to you could say, let's move it to the second note of the triplet. So if we do accenting the first note of the triplet, immediately followed by accenting the second note of the triplet using herters, we've got something like this. Obviously you could then also do that with accenting the third note in the triplet. That one's quite tricky because you end up with two herters immediately following each other. So you end up with 4 quick notes on one of your hands. So that's a bit of a tricky one, but it's something to work on. So the last kind of variation we can do to this particular pattern is to start using double strokes. Basically what we're going to do is when we're accenting the first note of the triplet, we're going to stick to playing single note accents. But when we shift so in this particular case, we're going to shift the accent to the third note of the triplet. When we do that, we're actually going to do the ghost notes leading up to the accent as a double stroke. I'm going to play it slowly, and then I'll kind of explain what it is that I'm doing a bit more. It sounds something a little bit like this. What I'm doing there is in the second part of it, I'm actually going, so I'm doing it left, left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right. For the right-handers among you, which is probably most of you, that would normally be right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left. Okay, so you are playing the accent with your weaker hand, as it were. So let me just play that as a whole again. And then Another step on from that is we can then do it the other way around, which is really, really good for kind of getting used to starting a phrase with your weaker hand. So in my case, I would then start it with my right hand, so with my first accent of a triplet with my right hand rather than my left hand. For you guys, it would be starting with your left hand. It's basically just opposite. Cool, so there's a few ideas for you. Obviously it's based around the idea of triplets and sort of moving the accent in triplets, but there's lots and lots of stuff in there where you can kind of make it more challenging or more easy. There's loads and loads of options there. They can be used as warm-ups. You can work them into fills or into grooves and stuff like that. There's lots and lots of different stuff that you can do with this. So hopefully you guys found that somewhat useful as well. As I said, I'm going to keep doing this, probably a couple of videos per week. And all the things I'm going to show you can be done on a practice pad. We might move on to doing some kit-based stuff towards the end as well. But what I really, really wanted to do was kind of mainly base this on sort of like practice pad stuff. But yeah, if you got something from this, please share it around. You know, hopefully it'll be useful to somebody. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.